Anybody home?
What kind of party is this, anyway?
A very strange party, if you'll pardon the expression.
Doctor Strange.
J. Mark DeMatteis.
I sold my first stories to DC. That's where I broke in. I had done some fill-in work for Marvel, for Jim Shooter, who really liked my work and wanted to bring me over there, and he knew that I had a passion for Doctor Strange. By the time I think I'd finished the first or second issue, they announced that the book was canceled, so I never quite got the chance to hit the rhythm that I wanted with the book. And then the last few issues were spent. They asked me to wrap up old plot lines from before my run, but I still had a great time. And Mark Buckingham, the artist, what a great artist for Doctor Strange. He did a beautiful job, but I always felt a little frustrated by that. That's a character I would return to. Yeah, I got to do that Baron Mordo story that I really wanted to do, and toyed with the origin a little bit, and it was fun. It was a lot of fun. I love that character. I did, back in the 80s, I did a Doctor Strange graphic novel with Dan Green called Into Shambhala, which I think is one of the best things I did for Marvel, but I have a real passion for that character.
He's a very good medium for your writing. It just seems to work very well.
Yeah, I like the mystical characters. They give you a chance to get philosophical and metaphysical, and those are the things that I really, really care about. Plus, Doctor Strange, as a character, has such a great backstory. He has one of the best backstories in comics. The whole arrogant surgeon who gets broken to bits and then, finds his hope through the spiritual master and then has his life remade. It's a fantastic story, which is why I think it's going to be a great movie.
Well, that's actually a bone of contention with me. Is my understanding is this is one of the movies that Marvel wants to get away from origins and start in the middle of his career. And if anybody needs an origin story depicted so that you can get audience interest into the character, that would be the origin, because he has one of the best origins ever.
I hadn't heard that that's what they were talking, but also what you hear before the movie happens is often very different than what happens when the movie comes out. So I really hope that they do the origin, because that's not a character you want to jump into when he's already Doctor Strange, because the reason you relate to him is because you know who he was before and what he went through. So I hope that they really do explore the origin, because it's one of the best in comics ever.
The following program has adult language and potential spoilers. Listener beware.
I'm Illegal Machine. So how should we cover this more?
Diabolu Frank. I think we covered enough. We can just sign out on that.
Hey, so when do we get to read good Doctor Strange stuff?
We're gonna. I just want to get this out of the way because I wanted to get my fears out of the way.
I'm so glad that you...
We could actually, if you want to, we could literally read a comic book and come right back to this and have a different opinion.
Let's read a comic book.
Mr. Fixit.
I am now very intrigued and want to read Doctor Strange comics.
Spider-Man, Iron Man, Spider-Woman.
We broke off when we read Doctor Strange number 169 from, do you remember the year? 68?
1968.
Just to set this up a little bit, obviously Stan Lee and Steve Ditko had started the series in Strange Tales. After Steve Ditko left Marvel, Maurice Severin had a run on the book. Bill Everett did the book for a while, and then I think Dan Adkins took over. Adkins drew a number of issues up to the point when they spun off Nick Fury into his own series with a number one issue, and Strange Tales was rebranded Doctor Strange. That only lasted a few months, and most of those issues were drawn by Gene Colan. So this was sort of this narrow window where they decided they wanted to retell the origin story as the coming of Doctor Strange. The writer was Roy Thomas, who wrote most of the Doctor Strange material from the late 60s through into the 70s. This expanded retelling of the origin story originally presented by Lee and Ditko. I've had a copy of this book for most of my life because it was one of the books my uncle gave me when I was a kid, and I still have my copy. Cover's missing, but I have a sentimental attachment to it, and it was one of my best introductions to Doctor Strange. But you're coming at it as somebody who's never read Doctor Strange before. You're coming off of the Strange miniseries.
So I can definitely see what you're saying, where he's a huge asshole in this book. They don't make any bones about that. This dude,
he was a surgeon, he was a dick, he was an asshole, and very materialistic. And karma got him really good. So then he turned into My Name is Earl.
He's the best neurosurgeon in the world, and he totally knows it.
I remember they said some organization were like, can you please help us? They're like, well, you can pay my bill. I guess you could say he was extremely self-involved. He was the 80s version of me.
Well, 60s version.
Well, 60s version. But he was the pre-80s yuppie mentality. Yuppie, yeah. Me. It's all about me. I'm the greatest. I would never follow anyone. Kind of like a Don Draper, wasn't he?
What do you mean?
It's when he was a doctor, that mentality.
Oh, yeah, he was very slick, but Draper wasn't as egomaniacal and as callous and
I'm only 3 seasons in, so I
well, that's strange, but Don Draper has some conscience. In this story, Stephen Strange has no conscience whatsoever.
You think so?
It's all about money and his accomplishments. He has no concern for the rest of humanity at all in the story. He's a total sociopath in this story from the sound of it.
So then
With the exception that somehow the Ancient One finds a glimmer of good inside Doctor Strange and wants to give him a chance to express that.
Mac?
There's one scene, let me see, where is it at? Where this guy comes to him asking him to help him with some charity work, and he says, charity work? You've got to be joking, Dr. Benton. These are the most talented hands in the annals of medicine. They don't touch a Band-Aid for anything but cash. I'm like, oh my God.
And I love, too, that Danny Adkins was one of the assistants to Wally Wood. He's probably used to Woody drawing with that cigarette dangling out the side of his mouth. And I think while he's speaking those lines, Dr. Strange has got this smug look on his face with that fucking cigarette sitting there.
Well, and then he says, well, I thought perhaps in this case, he says, maybe I shouldn't have been so hasty. I might agree to help with this research project for a slightly reduced fee if you agree to name any cures we might discover after me. And he goes, I'm afraid your fees are a bit out of our league, Dr. Strange, but perhaps you'll change your mind the day you join the human race. And then his phone rings, so he gets this call. Hello, Miss Van Heusen, I was expecting your call. If you excuse me, Dr. Benton? He's like, certainly, I was leaving. It's just like he picks up the phone in the middle of their conversation and it's like basically does that, you know,
hand
you
wave.
Can leave now. That little hand wave.
You're dismissed.
Dr. Benton? That 3 panels right there. Oh, yeah, I know who Dr. Strange is. And before that,
he already has more of a defined personality in 3 panels than he did in the entire 6-issue miniseries we read.
That is correct.
So why don't you tell him the basics of the origin? Because we already told them Strange, which was a vague semblance of the origin, so we can get this pretty tight, I think.
Start with him, obviously, is the world-renowned neurosurgeon on the planet. He's going to this woman, Miss Van Heusen's house, because she's super-duper loaded, and he's thinking, hey, if I can convince her to let me do any minor surgery on her, I'm going to get fat paid y'all, as they would have said in 1968. So he jumps in his Aston Martin or Corvette or whatever sort of weird amalgamation this car is of, and he goes driving on, Mulholland Drive, wherever he's at, on these snaky, windy, cliffy roads, on wet roads, I guess we should stress.
Speaking of wet, had he been drinking before that in this version of the story?
No, he was not.
Okay, in some versions he's drunk.
Really? Okay. No.
Wasn't he an alcoholic in one?
He was a drunk driver in one of the versions of the story. Yeah, in this version, they don't say that.
So, anyway, hits the brakes, loses control, goes off the side of the cliff, and almost dies. Wakes up in a hospital, and the doctor basically tells him, look, your hands, you're not going to be a surgeon anymore, bro. I'm sorry. And he's like...
And it's nerve damage.
And it's nerve damage. He's like, no, my hands, they're fine. I can grab your jacket. Watch me grab your jacket, you idiot. And he grabs his jacket. And he goes, well, yeah, that's great, but try holding a scalpel. And, of course, he tries to do it, and it doesn't work, and his hands are all shaky and whatnot.
Even they offer him, you can be a, what is it, not an assistant.
Even though you can't operate, you can work as a consultant. As my assistant.
And, that ain't going to work for Steve. Steve's having an issue with that. So
I assist nobody. I'll be the greatest or I'll be nothing.
So from there, it gets similar. He blows his whole fortune trying to find a cure, countless surgeries and operations, loses everything, becomes a bum for an extended period of time, and he hears 2 guys who appear to be pirates talking about how they've heard of this guy called the Ancient One overseas who can cure anything. He cured this guy's deafness that one guy had been talking to, and he was like, well, it's the best shot I got. So he uses every last dime that he has, pawns everything he has to get a one-way plane ticket to... Did they ever actually say where it is?
Come with us to India, land of mystic enchantment.
Come with us to Tibet, land of mystic enchantment.
The Himalayas, that's kind of it. So he goes to the Himalayas.
He's trekking through the ice and snow.
Yeah. And he's taken all these stories and hearsay that he's heard to put together where he thinks on a map this castle of the Ancient Ones would be. Just as this huge snowstorm's about to come in and he's done for, he sees emerging from the side of a mountain the Ancient One's castle. And so he walks on in and has a conversation with the Ancient One who dismisses him. And he's all like, hey, no, you can cure my hands. And he's all like, nope, not going to do any such thing. Be gone.
Because I think at one point...
I've searched for months, but now at last my quest has ended. You, old man, are you the one I seek? Are you called the Ancient One? Yes, I am the Ancient One. Then you're the one with the magic healing power? I need you. You have to help me. Be patient, child of the Western world. I heal none save those who deserve it. The power of my magic must never be wasted on the undeserving. First, you must prove you are worthy. You can't refuse me. I won't let you. I've traveled too far, waited too long. What? Stop. I will permit no act of violence here. None may lift a hand against the Ancient One. He's holding me motionless above the ground, just by a gesture. It's uncanny. And now I shall peer into your brain, into your memory, and learn the truth about you. You sought me for my healing power, but I cannot help you, for your motives are still selfish. And yet...
Let me see, I'm kind of fuzzy about this part. So why did he all of a sudden just decide to start living there? Was it just through the storm, maybe?
Yeah, I think he was just given shelter through the storm, the basic human kindness.
Okay, that's what it was. He was basically iced in.
I seem to see a spark within you, a spark of decency, of goodness, which I might be able to fan into a flame. There, I release you from your spell. If you stay here, study with me. Perhaps you will find within yourself the cure you seek.
So he was like, at one point, because he rushes the Ancient One basically levitates him and then drops him to the ground. He was like, oh, I don't believe what just happened.
Doesn't believe in the mystical arts. A bunch of hooey. Because he's like, oh, you're just a charlatan. Some kind of parlor trick. I was hypnotized.
And he was like, well, throughout your stay here, while we're waiting for him to thaw, think about it. And maybe you will believe what just happened.
That snow wasn't your doing. Oh, what am I saying? Pretty soon I'll convince myself you do have magic powers. Naturally, man of the Western world, you must not allow yourself to believe in magic. It wouldn't be seemly.
So he's hanging out with the master?
At that point, they introduce you to Baron Mordo, who's his pupil. Strange is moping around the place, decides he's going to go chat with the Ancient One.
Ask the old man if he knows how long it takes the snows to melt around here. Looks like he's asleep. Say, what's that vapor swirling around him? The vapors of Voltor. I am being attacked by an unseen enemy. The vapors were spawned by magic, and only magic can dispel them. I summon the powers of the Vishanti by the spell of the dread Dormammu. In the name of the all-seeing Agamotto, all thy powers I summon.
At that very second, in a blinding flash of light, the swirling vapors vanish into nothingness.
Begone, forces of darkness! If I hadn't seen it, I'd never believe it.
Walks by Mordo's room, and Mordo's conjuring up this crazy demonic stuff, talking about a Dormammu and everything. So he says, Dormammu, I've never heard that name before, yet the very sound of it fills me somehow with fear.
Dormammu, accept my incense offering. Let the force of your power descend upon my enemy. Let him feel your fatal touch. I beseech you, Dormammu.
That doll surrounded by vapor. It looks familiar.
Dormammu, do not fail me. Ah, the prying stranger has found me. You wonder what it is I do?
It's a replica of the Ancient One. He's trying to slay him.
I must tell the Ancient One. In which case, Mordo's like, dude, I know you're there.
And he creates I don't know what you'd call it, like a ball gag or...
This is like rivets.
He hits him with a spell that puts a metal plate across his mouth so he can't talk. But it's invisible.
I did like the way they played it up where you can see it on him, and then when he looks in the mirror, there's nothing there.
That's when he's like, it's beyond belief. The clamp isn't really there. It's existed only in my mind.
He knows it's there, and it's having the effect that Mordo wants, which is that Dr. Strange can't say anything ill against Mordo.
Yeah.
But he can still speak, so there's no reason to assume that that's what's happened.
But that's kind of neat. When I read that, I was like, that's kind of cool.
It's a strong visual.
Kind of high level for the year.
Yeah.
I mean, when did that come out? What year was that?
63.
All right, I mean, 63, that's some pretty...
And so then he chains his arms and his legs, and I mean, it was kind of neat.
Well, but invisibly.
Invisibly, yeah.
He
That's
feels like intense pain and electrical shock when he tries to walk toward the master or do anything that would betray what he knows about Mordo.
See, that's cool, man. That's some deep shit right there. That's deep.
Well, it's a stark contrast to Kaiju, where it's just a monster, right? I mean, there's a different plane of thought going into the story.
You know, though, now that you mention it, that metal covering that forces him not to speak, remember in The Matrix, when Keanu is being interrogated, his mouth seals shut and he can't breathe.
And
something to that.
I'm telling you, dude, they must have read the first few issues of Strange and said, I see something here.
You're telling me somebody adapted something from a comic book and made a bunch of money off of it in the movies? Get out of here.
Dude, he's even dressed a little bit like Strange. The coat, no?
I think that's a reach. But yeah.
Well, Strange never used a gun.
Yeah.
He did fly, though. He did fly.
Yeah, so what he decides is, okay, well, since I can't say anything bad about Mordo, I'll just talk to the Ancient One and convince him, hey, teach me what you know. I guess thinking in his head that if I learn enough spells and whatnot, I can then remove this plate from my mouth and warn the Ancient One what Mordo's up to. So once he gets over it in his head that the clamp's not really there, he's able to say something bad about Mordo, to which the Ancient One's like, I know all about Mordo, dude. The dude's living in my place. I keep my enemies close, is basically what he's saying. At least here, I can keep an eye on him, keep him out of trouble, and know what kind of meddling he's up to. But if you're serious, why don't you stay and become
another pupil? Right. Hopefully one that isn't a total dick.
Right. Yeah, not a total dick. And so he was like, oh, absolutely. He goes, now I've got nothing to do. My hands are crushed. I'm worthless. I can dedicate myself to this. And now knowing that Mordo is over there and he's this evil
imminent
version,
threat.
Right, and you're old, that's even more motivation. This is a purpose for me. And that's kind of how it ends.
Pretty straightforward, simple origin. All done in one issue.
Yeah, the issue, what it's like.
And that's the expanded version, because the original origin, I think, was like 6 to 12 pages.
Yeah, and it's like 18 pages. So that's a pretty good chunk, and there's a lot of dialogue on this stuff too. A lot of really cool visuals. I love it when he's having this nightmare dream on page 3 before he goes to sleep. He wakes up and then starts telling the origin. That's how you come across an origin issue. But as he first goes to sleep, there's this freaking awesome splash page of him dreaming all these
phantasmagoria eyes and
crying
pincers
and this hulking gorilla thing and this crab-armed guy in the background. Really cool looking shit. It's all zippatoned and whatnot.
Actually, no, I think that's drawn by hand.
Yeah, it's all. Yeah, it's probably crosshatched.
It's all, yeah.
Very, very cool stuff. So yeah, I thought it was a pretty good origin, especially to tell it in 16 pages of this issue. They crammed a lot of dialogue in it, but you understand the dude is a complete dick. You find out that he's completely given up on life. He's completely worthless. He's a bum. Where they don't even really play up the homelessness in that 6 issues. They don't really even play up the homelessness in that. Where he's straight up homeless, has to overhear about the Ancient One.
And in this story, like the other one, they say, hey, there's other things you can do. He's just unwilling to compromise.
Yeah, because he's the greatest surgeon on Earth, and he goes and he's like, you all just watch, I'm gonna be back. And that was where he starts just blowing all the money. Not, I'm just a regular plastic surgeon. Someone just gonna spend all my money, right? It's like, what?
Well, and it also helps that obviously nobody likes this guy. I mean, because he's loathsome. And it takes one of my theories about Doctor Strange and why he came into power and could become the Sorcerer Supreme is because the man has such an ego that where other people might waver in the face of the mind-bending stuff that he sees, he is so self-centered, he is so egotistical that he can handle that madness and hold on to his identity and interact with it without having a H.P. Lovecraft moment.
I do like that as he's telling this origin story, that he peeks back in after that little exchange with the charity guy, where he's like, these memories are painful and full of stinging venom. Like, even he
hates himself
back and he'd be like, man, this is some brutal stuff to flashback to. Back to the flashback, and then it goes back. But, you can tell that he's changed. And
he has remorse. He has sympathy now.
Remorse was the word I was looking for. Yeah, this is way better. It's a little cheeseball. I mean, it's 1968.
Right.
So the language is all dated.
It's not Lee and Ditko. It's Thomas and Dan Adkins. So it's not quite the same caliber of talent. Not the same degree of imagination.
Pretty good.
But I still think it's pretty good. I think as far as an introduction goes, very solid. And I want to say that they used that comic as a reprint with the Doctor Strange action figure they put out in one of the Marvel Legends lines or something.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, this is better. So yeah, there was just no need to. You didn't have to change anything. You could have made this into a 6-issue story.
Hey, how about a really nice special and save us all some trouble and a lot of money?
Right, yeah, but what I'm saying is that if they were like, you know what, dude, we're going to totally retell this guy's origin.
Just go into deeper.
If they were going to half-ass it, they could have just half-assed this origin, and it would have been perfectly fine.
Instead of fixing it.
Where you have to change everything and make everything a little bit different, even stuff that doesn't need to be fucked with. Let's go ahead and fuck with it a little bit.
And it's just so you can lay claim to having been the person who brought that about. But since nothing ever came out of it aside from that shitty animated movie, then you amounted to nothing. You brought nothing to this table.
And so it began. The days passed into weeks, to months, to years, as Doctor Strange studied the long-dead mystic arts. Slowly he changed. Slowly his life took on a new, deeper meaning. Slowly he prepared himself for the epic battles ahead, the battles which could only be won by Doctor Strange.
Strange Tales number 110 came out, cover dated July 1963. That's the first appearance of Doctor Strange. And the story is called Doctor Strange, Master of Black Magic. It starts with this little scroll that reads, "Men call him Doctor Strange. Never have you known his like. It is a great pleasure and privilege for the editors of Strange Tales to present quietly and without fanfare the first of a new series based upon a different kind of superhero, Doctor Strange, Master of Black Magic," by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. In this first story, this dude can't sleep. He wakes up with these night terrors all the time. And so he goes to Doctor Strange seeking help. So Doctor Strange astral projects and flies first to visit the Master, this ancient being, this old wizened man. And both, by the way, both Doctor Strange and the Master are drawn Asiatic. I'm pretty confident they were both meant to be Asians. They both have
Even
those
Dr.
almond
Strange?
eyes. They're very, yeah, I'll show you the picture in a minute.
Oh, no, I mean, I saw the A page. Oh, this ain't the same one you had us read.
No, this is a different story.
Oh, okay.
Look at the Master and look at Doctor Strange and tell me they don't have
No, definitely the Master. Strange, I'm getting a very Italian vibe.
Italian, really?
Yeah. You don't know what you fucking do. You know, hey, I'm just getting a very Guido vibe.
Oh, dear God.
I tell you, you're not keeping that in there.
I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
Okay, no, I mean, I do see that, of course, the Master is playing on stereotypes of an ancient Chinese secret. Good thing Machine in here. 'Cause he would do a horrible. Yeah. He does the best, but I wouldn't say Strange looks Asian. I mean, he's definitely ethnic. He is not white.
He definitely has narrow slit eyes that are almond shaped. So Doctor Strange visits the Master. Doctor Strange has some really weird, cool facial hair thing going on with the eyebrows.
Yes. I think he's minority, but I don't think he's Asian.
Maybe Indian?
Gypsy?
Gypsy, fuck. Okay. Actually, Gypsy is like a minority group that people have issues with saying the word gypsy now.
Really?
I believe that, yeah. Yeah, I think you're supposed to call them Roma or something now.
Dude, I just saw a show called My Big Gypsy Way.
Right, but what you call yourself versus what other people call you is the thing. So anyhow.
You have to say gypsy with an A at the end.
Gypsy.
So Doctor Strange goes and he visits the Master and he tells him basically, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And then he flies into the dream of the guy who enlisted his aid and he sees this robed figure with no visible face in chains. And at first Strange thinks that he's going to confront this being, but then the being tells him, "I'm the symbol of evil, the evil he has done. That is why I'm chained so. If you do not believe, ask Mr. Krang." That's another one too. Krang is not a name that one would typically associate with Occidentals or anybody really, but it definitely sounds like somebody's pretend Asiatic name as opposed to an Occidental name. Anyhow, so then a black silhouette of a horse and a caped figure rides up.
I caught you and the good doctor sleeping on the job. And now the world belongs to Nightmare.
And it turns out this is Nightmare, the Doctor Strange villain. Are you familiar with Nightmare?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's fought the Hulk.
Yeah. He's not from the Hulk, but he's fought the Hulk. He's fought the Hulk, though. Yeah. And the guy, pretty much throughout the story, is just a black silhouette. You see little hints of cross-hatching and stuff on the edges, but he's mostly just solid black. Now that Doctor Strange has found out that the guy he's helping is actually a bad guy who got involved with some bad business dealings and that ended up in the death of Mr. Krang, Doctor Strange is busy fighting Nightmare. This guy wakes up and realizes that Strange knows what's going on, and so he grabs his gun and he's going to shoot Doctor Strange while he's still astral projecting and helpless. So what Strange does, since he's in a rival's dimension and Nightmare basically has power over him here and he can die in this dimension, he contacts the Master and the Master remotely causes the Eye of Agamotto to open, or let's see, I don't know if they actually call it the Eye at this point. I think it's just called, and yeah, he's just this amulet because it's a slightly different shape, but it still has an eye in it. And the eye opens up and blasts the guy and freezes him, and it gives Doctor Strange time to fly back out of the dream, confront the criminal, and force him to confess his crimes. Dude, and that's the first ever Doctor Strange story.
You literally just described the Matrix.
Really?
Yeah, think about it. Neo is in the Matrix fighting Mr. Smith, who is Nightmare, and his body is left in the real world where Cypher is about to kill him with a gun and have him die literally twice, once in the Matrix as well as his physical body.
Hadn't thought about that. That's actually an interesting comment you made there.
Well, no, dude, literally while you're saying it to me, I'm like, are we talking Doctor Strange in the Matrix, dude? Because that sounds like Neo.
Well, no, what's funny is J. Michael Straczynski, when he decided to do a Doctor Strange miniseries, he took from the Matrix and applied it to Doctor Strange. So it's funny that you're thinking that maybe the Wachowskis might have taken from Doctor Strange and applied it to the Matrix.
Well, tell me,
this little Ouroboros thing.
I mean, if you listen to it, doesn't that sound kind of...
No, I hadn't caught it, but it's a good point, yeah. And so that's the first ever Doctor Strange story.
So they wrote the Matrix when again?
About 30 years after the story came out. And they're
No, I'm saying this story came out.
Oh, that's 63.
63?
Yeah.
Now you will know what true power is, Strange.
Second story was called Face to Face with the Magic of Baron Mordo. It introduces Mordo, and he's a guy, and again, he's got the narrow eyes. It makes me wonder if he wasn't intended to be a minority himself at this point. And he's got the wild tufts of hair around his ears, while it's also simultaneously slicked back and with a goatee. He's an interesting looking fellow. He's a very distinctive look. Not too many people in comics look like that. He takes mental command of a servant of the master and causes this servant to poison the master, and the master's slowly growing weaker. I was your pupil, and now I need you to give me the secret so I can be a master too, or I'm going to just let you die. And the longer this takes, the weaker you're going to get, and the closer to death you're going to come. So Dr. Strange is alerted, and he astral projects from his home in North America to wherever the master and Mordo are. And Mordo and Dr. Strange have a fist fight on the astral plane with each other. Finally, Dr. Strange sends some of his life force to the master to help to heal him. It forces a situation where Mordo has to return to his own body. So he goes flying back to protect his body because he thinks Strange is going to attack his physical form that he's astral projected out of. But in fact, Strange had tricked him and followed him back to the body so he knew where it was at. And he cast a spell on it that prevented him from affecting the master. In particular, he was able to take control of that servant that initially poisoned the master and use him to help rebuild the master's strength. And that was the end of the second Doctor Strange story. And these things are really short. They're like 5-6 pages.
What did we read? What the hell did we read?
We're getting to that.
Okay.
My years of devotion to the dark arts have made me strong. Stronger than you.
Third Doctor Strange story is in issue 114. Strange Tales took 2 issues off because they were waiting to see if anything was going to go with this. And I think this was also around the time that Spider-Man was getting started. And so Steve Ditko was probably spending more time on Spider-Man, and Stan maybe wanted to give him a chance to get up to speed and also wanted to make sure he wasn't wasting his time on this non-cover featured filler material in the back of Strange Tales when they could just run some more monster stories. So the third Doctor Strange story is called The Return of the Omnipotent Baron Mordo. And there's a caption in the first panel that says, in Strange Tales number 110 and 111, we introduced the mystifying Doctor Strange. Then we waited to receive your letters to see if you would want him continued. Well, your enthusiastic mail left us only one choice, and so we proudly present the third in our newest series. There's a fellow called Sir Clive Bentley that apparently Doctor Strange had been associated with in his past, but it had been a decade prior that these guys were working together. And he calls to Doctor Strange for help, and Strange says, I have vowed never to refuse a call for help. I shall be there. So he goes from New York to London to help out this Sir Bentley guy, but it turns out it's actually Mordo in disguise who's luring Doctor Strange into a trap. So Strange walks into this guy's castle, and there's a candle burning, and the vapors from the candle trap Doctor Strange, and as the candle is melting, Strange gets weaker and weaker until he dies when the candle is extinguished. Strange gets in contact with the Master again, the guy who saved him in that first story, and the Master's like, okay, well, let me come in and help you again. And Strange's like, no. This guy used to be your disciple. I'm your disciple now. I have to solve this problem myself to prove that I'm worthy, so I have to put my life on the line to make sure that I can succeed you as the Master when you're gone, because this guy is old and sick from the very first story. He's like Aunt May. So what Doctor Strange does is he uses his amulet to contact a random woman in London, apparently, and take over her will and force her to come to the castle and put out the candle before it extinguishes on its own. It turns out that this woman is Victoria Bentley, daughter of Lord Bentley, who had died. He senses that this woman has mystical potential, and so this is something that's going to be left hanging for some time. It's like whether or not she would be involved with these stories ever again. Mordo shows up, and Mordo threatens to kill the lady, so Doctor Strange fights him, and it turns out that Strange had only created a simulation of himself, so I'm not sure how or why he was trapped or how or why he brought the Lady Bentley into the house since he wasn't really in peril. But so he shows up and he catches the Mordo by surprise and blasts him. They have a fight and he manages to defeat Mordo. But Mordo is actually officially still stronger than Doctor Strange, and there's a concern that the next time they fight, one or the other is going to die, because at that time Doctor Strange won't have the element of surprise. It isn't until the fourth story that we finally get to the origin of Doctor Strange, and it actually is listed here on the flash page. In answer to an avalanche of requests, we present the origin of Doctor Strange. And there's this enormous editor's note, and it reads, it could only happen to the offbeat Marvel Comics group. With 3 published stories of Doctor Strange already under our belts, we have been overwhelmed by a flood of letters reminding us that we forgot one little detail. We forgot to give you his origin. We'll never let it be said that we don't try to correct our nutty mistakes. Stan and Steve dropped everything and rushed this extra long 8-pager into production in time for this ish. If there's anything else they've forgotten, don't tell them. They're out resting up by trying to finish the latest issue of Spider-Man on time. And now, here it is, the origin of the mysterious master of black magic. Where does he come from? How did he get his powers? Who is he?
Ooh, that black magic.
That's a nice splash page too, with the spiderweb thing going on.
I like the artwork. I enjoyed it.
Well, what is the origin of Doctor Strange since you just read it?
He was just an asshole, dude. Gets in a car wreck, hurts his hands. Now, the funny thing is, I remember reading, I maybe watched a cartoon, and in that one, he seeks the Master because the Master can cure him or heal him so he can go back to his old life. Or in this one, he kind of stumbles into it because he overheard some sailors say, well, there's a guy called the Master that can heal you.
Well, they don't even talk to him directly.
He overhears them. Yeah.
Because one of the things that with the story, too, this version of the story, it starts with Stephen Strange walking into the temple on the Ancient One. The Ancient One is like, I can't help you with your problem. And Strange's like, yes, you'll help me. I'll beat your ass, basically. And the Ancient One's like, well, I won't permit violence here, but I'm going to use my powers to find out what brought you to me. And then the rest of it's told in flashback. You lost track of time. You became a drifter, little more than a human derelict. And then one day on the docks, you overheard two sailors.
Yeah, because I've read some of the later versions, and they're pretty much the same, though, right? Yeah,
he doesn't. His only flaw in this story is what a shitheel he is.
Okay, so he's more like what was the character from American Psycho?
Yeah, Patrick Bateman. That's actually probably closer to the way that he's depicted.
So you would see him more portrayed as Patrick Bateman?
Yeah, somebody who just has no humanity and no conception of the value of other human lives beyond his own.
That's an engineer, not a doctor. A little shot of engineers there.
So would you say he's very narcissistic?
Yeah.
So he's very narcissistic as well?
Extraordinarily narcissistic, yes. I mean, all he's doing is running around saying how great he is, pay me or fuck off.
And it was weird because they said his hands weren't harmed, just the nerves. So his nerves were damaged, but his hands were fine.
Although your hands seem to be all right, the nerves have been severely damaged. And you do see them trembling in the eye. So what happened next?
We first meet Mordo. What's his name? Mordo?
Yeah, Baron Mordo.
Yeah,
Mordo. And also one thing because I've read later versions, so I wanted to point out, when Strange comes to the domain of the Ancient One in the mountains, it's a clear path. It only starts snowing to the degree that he can't get out of the facility until after he's there and rejected the Ancient One and is one to go back, and then all of a sudden there's snow.
Okay.
Because it's one of the things where it's like, he wants to think like...
Well, he even hints at it, like, did you make this snow?
I'm obviously going nuts here. It's going to make you a believer. I'm already thinking this guy could somehow have made it snow, and that's obviously impossible.
Yeah. And then, of course, Steven discovers that Mordor is plotting to kill the Master.
Just for the record, Mordor is Lord of the Rings.
I know, I can't... They're Mordo. Mardo, Mido, fucking... The other Asiatic-looking character.
So you agree he looks like he's Asian?
Oh, yeah.
He's kind of boxy. The other guys are like real slender, and he's like a boxy. He's more Mongolian.
Asshole, man. Oh, the one time it ends up in the show, you can say
this was the chance you had to use it, and you didn't.
Apparently, I dropped the fucking ball on this one.
Well,
it's weird because the weird thing is, so you gave me that to read, and then so they did it backwards. They did 3 episodes, they did 3 issues, then they do the origin story.
Yeah.
So
because apparently, I think what it was is basically they were just putting the character out there.
Like a filler? Was it like a filler just to fill it up?
I don't know. I don't think that Stan Lee would at that point, because I think around the same time Spider-Man was coming out. So I think Steve Ditko's profile was probably rising somewhat. Plus, Ditko had been, I don't think that the Charlton stuff really did much for him. So I think what had happened is that they had this concept, they had this idea of a Mandrake the Magician type character, but played more elaborately, more fantastically. Because Mandrake ultimately was just a stage magician who used stage magic to fight crime and have adventures, where they wanted to do one that was an actual wizard, like a modern day wizard.
Well, because I've heard, some people who love Doctor Strange have told me, oh, you need to read this really weird shit that he was doing. And
that wasn't really present in this story, though. It's fairly straightforward, right?
It's kind of, straightforward, but I've always heard if you really want something that's really trippy and weird that you read Doctor Strange. Yeah. And I was like, okay, so I have never personally read.
Was this like the first Doctor Strange story you ever read as the origin?
Primarily Strange, yes.
Yeah. Basically what had happened is Strange Tales at that point in time was what the cover featured star was the Human Torch. Because for years it had been one of those Atlas horror titles where, because the Comics Code had neutered any actual horror, it was all giant monster stuff. It was all kaiju. It was all giant insects and Krug and Groot, actually. That's where Groot got started.
No way.
Yeah, you didn't know about that? Groot was in, I think, Tales to Astonish or one of those titles, and he was this big tree thing that was trying to take over the world. He actually was articulate. He could talk at that point. Groot will take over the world.
No.
And I think at the end they shoot him off into outer space, and eventually the Groot that we have now was descended from that. But Groot didn't appear from that story for decades later, and they brought him back in. But he was in one of those little throwaway monster stories because they were all all like that. The only major difference was what tree-like thing or insect-like thing or whatever that they were going to have, what rocky thing there was going to be, and who was going to draw it. Steve Ditko would draw some, Kirby would draw some. But once the superheroes started taking off, Strange Tales went from this monster title to the Human Torch is frontlining it, and apparently it's doing okay, but not super. And then they tried, well, let's introduce another hero in the book and see if that does something good. And since the book was called Strange Tales, they figured, well, let's do something that's strange. Let's do something that's more mysterious. So you end up with Doctor Strange. I guess they gave it a couple of episodes to see if it would work out, and they got an avalanche of letters according to them.
It was the bee's knees.
Yeah, and so they went back and they did the origin because they realized, okay, well, we didn't do an origin for this guy before. People are asking for it. Let's do that story next. And that's why it came out, what is it, like fourth in the line.
Yeah.
One thing I want to point out, too, is when Mordo attacks the Master says, the vapors of Valtor, I'm being attacked by an unseen enemy. The vapors respond by black magic, and only by black magic can they be dispelled. I summon the powers of the Vishanti by the spell of the dread Dormammu. In the name of the all-seeing Agamotto, all thy power I summon. Be gone, forces of darkness. What's interesting to me is it makes it clear, I mean, obviously Doctor Strange referred to as Master of Black Magic. The Master calls upon Dormammu, who is going to be a major figure in Doctor Strange eventually. I don't think they'd had that worked out by this point in the story, but it shows that the Master was willing to play with these dark arts and obligate himself to an evil power like Dormammu in order to get stuff done. And his disciple, whether he taught him that or not, was also willing the same black magic. So it's interesting that there's a moral ambiguity there, since they're willing to go into the black arts to affect these changes mystically.
Well, in the book, like later books of Strange, was he a straight hero, or is he one of those kind of hentai heroes?
He's straighter as the series progresses.
So he's a white hat.
He's a white hat, but I think you can, through the origin, I think you can read a lot of negativity into Doctor Strange and his motivations. And there are things that happen around him where it's not text, but I think that the subtext is there. This is a guy who says, you know what, he's a politician. He's a guy who says, I'm going out there and I'm going to be truthful and I'm going to save people and I'm going to do good. But then the ways in which he does that, it's like, well, is that correct? You're talking a good game, but if you're, again, if he's listening to the power of Dormammu, then obviously this guy's playing in some black areas. Of course, guys like Warren Ellis kind of play with that too, where this guy is clearly compromised by some of the things that he's associated with.
Did Warren Ellis write any Doctor Strange?
He did a reboot of the character in the 90s. Not a reboot, not a hard reboot. It was a soft reboot. It was after David Quinn, who had done the Faust series with Tim Vigil. You know, this very dark, very sexually provocative series. Well, he got recruited by Marvel to redo Doctor Strange. And if you remember, there was that period where he was wearing the faceless, featureless mask, and he was like in a blue outfit with all these pointy sigils and stuff all over it. Well, Quinn wrote that version of Strange, and he was actually just called Strange, and he separated the Doctor was one guy and Strange was another guy. And then eventually they created this hybrid Doctor Strange where he was running around in a trench coat with long hair. I think he might have had rave kid glasses, back in the day. And then after Quinn left or was fired or whatever happened, I don't know how he left the book. When Quinn left the book, they brought in, I think Mark Buckingham was already drawing it from that point, but then they brought in Warren Ellis, and Warren Ellis did a reboot where he'd apparently gone off to another dimension and been fighting there for an unspecified amount of time, and he had other dimensional lice in his hair, and he grew a Alan Moore beard. Him coming home from those wars and shaving it all off and picking up where he left off in the universe, where he was closer to the more classic version of Doctor Strange.
Was it a fucked up story? Or?
There were dark elements to it. I mean, it's Warren Ellis. I mean, it kind of goes without saying.
Because didn't Warren Ellis also do Druid?
Yeah, absolutely. Not as dark as Druid.
Because I always thought Druid was maybe intentionally supposed to be strange, but they're like, yeah, you can't do this with Strange. Like, no, you can't touch Strange like that. And he's like, well, I need a mystical
Druid's
hero.
definitely the broke-ass Doctor.
Yeah, he's like...
Well, I think that's part of the point. I think what happened is Warren Ellis had done Hellstorm. That series had ended. They gave him the 4 issues of Druid. That miniseries ended. I think it might have actually been intended for an ongoing series, but it was pretty far afield, yeah. So I think somebody went, well, that could be better on Doctor Strange. And we can't support a Druid title, but maybe we could put the guy who made Druid more interesting on Doctor Strange and make him more interesting.
Okay, because I always felt like maybe that Druid book was made for Doctor Strange, but it was really the fuck way out there.
There might have been some meta text where he shows up looking like Druid, and then he shaves it all off and becomes Doctor Strange. Maybe there was something going on there that I didn't catch.
How long did that series last?
Given that Warren Ellis, the Warren Ellis element was only about like 4 to 6 issues, if I remember correctly. He was replaced by J.M. DeMatteis.
Is Druid on there?
I don't know if Druid's on here. I was going to just save that Doctor Strange run.
I'll have to check it out.
Mm-hmm. So how did the story end, though?
So the master gets out and basically convinces Strange that the dark arts do exist and that he sees that little glimmer of hope in him and is going to take him under his wing and teach him the mystic arts. At which point Strange goes from days to weeks, 2 months, 2 years of training to where he's starting to pick up the mystical arts.
He missed the part, too, where the Ancient One knew that Mordo was...
Yeah, He said, what did he say? He was keeping them close by so he could keep an eye on him, but he knew he could beat his ass anytime. The Master never seemed truly worried about him.
Well, that's one thing, too, with the Doctor Strange stories, is Mordo is the main guy who fights Doctor Strange in the early stories. But the thing is since he beats Mordo so many times in such a short span of time, I think it's hard for anybody who's read any large number of Doctor Strange stories to take Mordo entirely seriously. Because while he might have been a protege of the Ancient One, he just gets beat all the time. He's like the Batroc of Doctor Strange stories.
Ouch!
It's true, though. It's like, I've talked about it in this past, where Batroc, it would be a challenging foe for most anybody but Captain America, but he's Captain America's bitch. Easily and unquestionably, to the point where he has to recruit whole teams of people to go after Captain America to make it any kind of a fight at all. Well, the same thing happens with Mordo. Mordo gets beaten by Doctor Strange so many times in the early stories that he goes running to Dormammu, and that's when you end up with the true arch enemy. Just say arch enemy.
Right, I guess that's true. If Mordo was on Dormammu's plane, then he wouldn't need to go to Dormammu, right? I mean, he would be more the lackey.
Yeah. Well, and the truth is, too, is most of the Mordo stories aren't that interesting. They're not that imaginative because it's before things get weird. With Dormammu in the Dark Dimension, that's when things just get when the real trippy imagery starts to kick in, and when you get that incredible scale where, wow, this guy's way above Doctor Strange's level. Where Mordo, even though they try to say that Mordo is more powerful than Strange because he's trained with the Ancient One longer, you never get that sense. Plus, Strange can always run to the Ancient One and go, hey, save me, and then the Ancient One, comes to the rescue. So Mordo, regardless of whether or not he's more powerful than Strange, never comes across as a legitimate threat because between Strange and the Ancient One, they can counter him.
It kind of happens, though. I mean, over, 40 plus years of existence, the main villain isn't going to get defeated over and over and over again.
But that's the problem, is it wasn't 40 plus years. It was like within a year span.
Okay.
Because Mordo just kept popping up over and over again and getting defeated in story after story. Because he was the only guy that Doctor Strange fought for a long time there. And since they weren't doing continuing stories in these early stories, it's just like, here's an adventure, and Mordo gets beat in the end. He was like Shredder or something.
Shredder?
What? He went there with it.
Well, you said Krang was in the
okay,
story,
how
right?
about this Cobra Commander? People like the look of Cobra Commander, but nobody's really impressed by Cobra Commander.
I always got to ask.
You're impressed by Destro. You're impressed by the Cobra organization as a whole. You're impressed by Zartan. I'm pretty confident that any of the three of us could take on Cobra Commander.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember my Marvel Unlimited login. This is extremely.
I was trying to find that Warren Ellis Doctor Strange stuff you were talking about, man.
Well, I can check for it really easily.
Movies? I love to talk film, discuss, to critique. You want to see a film with me?
The Film and Water Podcast, a weekly show about movies old and new, hosted by obsessive movie nerd Rob Kelly and a rotating series of special guests. From sci-fi to horror, dramas to family films, comedies to adventure epics, we watch it all. The Film and Water Podcast is part of the Fire and Water family of podcasts, available weekly at fireandwaterpodcast.blogspot.com and on iTunes and Stitcher.
you ever saw. Well, my next one will be better.
Aquaman and Firestorm fighting crime together. Soak them down or burn them up. No one does it better. Whenever you find trouble, they'll always be there to catch them in a bubble or even torch their hair. They stand for truth and justice in sea, on land, and air. Firestorm and Aquaman, they make a super pair.
The Fire and Water Podcast, celebrating Aquaman, King of the Seven Seas, and Firestorm, the Nuclear Man.
Available weekly on Aquaman Shrine, Firestorm Fan, and on iTunes and Stitcher.
I'm one of your hosts, the Irredeemable Shag, here to talk about Firestorm. Along with me is my co-host Rob Kelly, here to talk about some guy that talks to fish.
Really? You're going to pull this crap during the promo? Bad enough I have to put up with your shenanigans every week, but...
Kalabak, Tassad, it is I, Darkseid. I command you to listen to the Who's Who podcast. Uncover the powers and weaknesses of the Super Friends so that I may destroy them.
Aquaman and Superman, Animal Man and Plastic Man, Firestorm the Nuclear Man, Batman and Hawkman, 2D Man and Hour Man. Who are all these people, man? They're all part of the DC Who's Who. Ultra Boy and Booster Gold, Lightning Lass and Hippolyta, Phantom Stranger, Etrick and Arisia and Woozy Winks.
Hey.
What?
What about that one guy?
What guy?
Mr. Pretzel, Mr. Lipstick, Mr. Mitzelfuzzle?
Mr. Mitzi's Pitlick?
Yeah, him.
He's also part of the DC Who's Who.
Who's Who, the definitive podcast of the DC Universe.
Available monthly at Aquaman Shrine, Firestorm Fan, and on iTunes and Stitcher as part of the Fire and Water Podcast.
Most of the material from the last two episodes was recorded a year ago, so I'd like to acknowledge that the Doctor Strange movie has become an origin story, if it ever was anything besides that. And in the time since our recording, Baron Mordo was cast. The actor is Chiwetel Ejiofor, which I have a major problem with. This is an Academy Award nominated actor. He deserves better than Baron Mordo. I really would have liked him to play T'Challa or T'Chaka in the Black Panther movie, but my hope is that he's going to pull a Tom Hiddleston and become more popular than the hero that he's working alongside, since by rights, I'd much rather prefer him to play Doctor Strange. Although I'll also point out that my opinion of Benedict Cumberbatch has improved recently based on his willingness to stand up to the British press, criticizing him for his support of Syrian refugees. He seems like a real stand-up guy. Also, since this recording, I've taken a look at some blogs that point out that Dan Adkins did quite a bit of swiping for the art in Strange Tales number 169. In particular, a scene where Doctor Strange is in a surgical gown and elements from that dream menagerie that Mac and I liked so much. We received Twitter follows from Ali Spagnola, Andrew Main, Anubis Promo, Avatar Ram Sin, Billy Hogan, Brian Hazard, Chasing Amazing Blog, Cinema Crespodiso, Dale Lazaroff, Devon Sagliani, Hank at LADC, Jason Campbell, Marilyn Monroe DC, Misaela Virgin, My Social Fam, Rare Horror Movies, RNDM is out now, Screech, and Walter Blake Noblock. We received retweets from CJ and favorites from Anthony Miyazaki, PhD, Behind the Magic Podcast, Coffee and Comics Blog, Eli Ilperin, iZombie Obsessed, Christian Molina, Odell Abner Dracula, Over News or Movies, Taman Bob, and Valentino Orfanos. Follow Fridays came from Comic Reflections and Drunken Dork Podcast. Happy Turkey Day came from Adam Blackmoon, and Timo Stofregen called us good people. Shows what they know. The 108th Sage said, I'm dearly loving Rolled Spine podcasts and pretty much everything Diabolu Frank has produced, and I dearly love his cohorts on the MSH podcast. Odell Abner Dracula replied to my shout out for daytime faves and nighttime retweeters, hoping no one else discovers where they go, what they do. Not Guanoman wrote, one of the best things about Jessica Jones, a living, breathing Patsy Walker, renamed Trish for MCU purposes. Patsy is a really fascinating character and among Marvel's oldest, first appearing way back in 1944. At first, Patsy was a teen romance character, but gradually became incorporated into the Marvel Universe proper, taking on the superhero identity Hellcat, joining the Defenders and the Avengers, and marrying Damon Hellstrom, son of Satan. No, really. I love the fact that Jessica Jones series keeps alluding to Patsy's past as a red-haired child star teen icon. Some very nice nods to her real-world and fictional history. For the full lowdown on Patsy, I'd strongly recommend you check out the special episode of her by Rolled Spine Podcast. podcasts. Jason Bargidas let us know that he's listening to the Marvel Superheroes podcast, Strange Beginnings and Endings, 2004. Keith G. Baker wrote, I highly recommend the new Aaron Bachelot Doctor Strange series. Just read first 2 issues and am hooked. Issue 2 came out a couple of weeks ago. I'm not up on the print to Marvel Unlimited lag time. Soon, hopefully. Hashtag fuck if I know. I absolutely fucking love Illegal Machine's recaps of books. Could you loan him out to read my stack for me? Hashtag thanks in advance. Count Drugler wrote, Rolled Spine ruined Strange for me. I always liked that story until Illegal Machine said Matrix and the floor dropped out from under me. Illegal Machine wrote, that shit sucks, brah. Hashtag thoughtful commentary. Ange wrote, Strange is one of those guys that has existed on the periphery of my decades of reading. I haven't read much of him or his exploits. I never got a solo book. Rarely got Defenders. Longest engagement has been with the recent Hickman Secret Avengers. Weird. As a Ditko guy, I think I should be looking for some sort of essential Strange book. As for this miniseries, sounds like I did the right thing not getting it. I have vowed to never get another JMS book for all the sins that Frank eloquently points out on the podcast. So I'm not surprised this is something of a bomb. I personally have all 4 of the essential volumes of Doctor Strange. I definitely recommend at least picking up the first one. At some point I need to go ahead and pick up whatever Marvel's calling their big fat color versions of the essentials. But since those also come with a bigger, fatter price point, I haven't been in a big rush. Illegal Machine wrote, Mac here, and I have to totally agree with you. I'd never had Strange cross my path. Flipping through Frank's Essential Doctor Strange, Ditko's World of Magic is just jaw-dropping. It's just so different from the world of Kirby bubbles, monsters, and explosions we're used to. Siskoid wrote, JMS is a terrible comic book writer, just awful. And not just because he's so cheesy and pretentious. You hit it out of the ballpark here. It's because he doesn't understand any of the characters he writes and just writes what he thinks those characters are based on absolutely no research or any previous appearances. Like Ange, I'm absolutely not surprised this sucked, but I'm glad it exists so I could enjoy your takedown of it. Your makeshift trailer for my show is appreciated, but mostly makes me realize I should make a proper trailer for it, and soon.
The Lonely Hearts Romance Comics Podcast, in which 4 guys talk about romance comics and about romances in comics, with Siskoid.
We're all French Canadians here.
Marty.
In horror comics, there's often like this little, romance tinge, I guess.
Okay.
Bass.
We just turned on him.
And yours truly, Fern.
I'm very aroused.
Featuring the overproduced wonder that is romance comics theater every episode.
Dan, I knew it couldn't last from the first day you eyeballed me when I reported to work. It wouldn't matter if I washed in laundry soap and came to work in a burlap sack. I'd turn you on. And you have the same effect on me.
I do?
The Lonely Hearts Romance Comics Podcast, available at lonelyheartspodcast.wordpress.com and on iTunes.
We've had a comic book romance.
By the way, Illegal Machine has started listening to the Lonely Hearts podcast, and the last time I saw him, he was trying to claim that it was better than this podcast. I had to kind of talk him back off the ledge on that front. And finally, the Merry Marvel Marching Society, featuring Ange, Ashley Rose, Bone Dragon Comics, Charlton Hero, Dr. G Nerdologist, The Drunken Dork Podcast, Eric Mannix, Future Primitive, The Illegal Formation Podcast, James A. Bretney, Joseph Crawford, Kevin Daji, Mark Sweeney, Marvel Incorporated 2099, Out of the Fridge, Pittsburgh Nerd Podcast, The Penultimate, Siskoid, Sin and Alias Scarecrow, Too Dangerous for a Girl blog, and Tracker Talk.
The Marvel Superheroes Podcast is in no way affiliated with or endorsed by Marvel Entertainment. All characters mentioned and audio clips employed are believed covered under fair use, with no infringement intended against their copyright holders. The views expressed in this podcast are assumed legitimate, truthful, and solely possessed by the speaker.
All right, well, guys, thank you very much for being on this episode of Secret Origins. Assuming, the listeners really loved hearing everything that you had to say about Green Lantern and want to hear more of it.
Bullshit.
Or at least 65% of it, maybe. Let's not go for 100%. It can't be boom or bust. It's got to be a little bit in between. Our podcast is obviously, we're available on iTunes and Stitcher. And we also have a voicemail.
Or tell us we suck.
Do that in writing, though, instead.
I mean, I listen to so many of these Secret Origins episodes, and I'm just kind of replaying ours in my mind. I'm just going, man, Some of your guests come on way more prepared than we did. we just kind of rambled incoherently. We really stretched Ryan's format this time around. So I'm sorry to regular listeners of Secret Origins.
You know, but I'm going to cut this down to a half an hour, so they're never going to know.
But, you know, at least we're having fun rambling and not just kind of crazy reference. But did you ever watch Heroes, the TV show?
I did, yeah.
Okay, do you remember Charlie, who had that whole little thing where she just remembered every fact ever and just wouldn't stop talking?
Vaguely.
Hiro Nakamura's, like, redheaded waitress chick in Texas he comes across?
Yeah.
That's Frank. We ramble because they popped into our heads and we just want to share the information. Frank sounds like he's on autopilot sometimes.
Tickle fight.
Between the two of us, between the three of us in this episode, outside of Ryan, I'm sorry, guys. There's going to be two different kinds of rambling in this episode.
No, that's not what happened. Hold on.
Then, you know what? It's all in great fun, and it's all about comics, so just enjoy it. If you like the more analytical approach that Frank's going to give you, fantastic. If you like us just going off the deep end and random tangents, lanterncast.com.
Really how it ends? That escalated quickly.